Hey, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Sonoma Valley Church of the Nazarene. I'm here today with my friend and my colleague, Rabbi Steve Finley from Congregation Shir Shalom, and we're going to try to do something that's a little bit different today. I invited Steve here because in our tradition, I don't think that the passage that we're going to look at this morning has often been understood the way it should. And I thought Steve was in a unique position to be able to help us come up with some fresh thoughts on that. So we're going to be tackling Genesis chapter 19 today, if you guys want to follow along. Steve, welcome to Sonoma Valley Church of the Nazarene.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
About myself. So this is my 8th year in the town of Sonoma.
Okay.
Serving Congregation Shir Shalom. Before that, I was the rabbi down in Mexico City. That's a whole nother story. So I'm married to my wife, Yafa. We actually celebrated our 25th anniversary.
That's awesome.
Just yesterday.
Yeah.
We're still celebrating.
And Yafa means beautiful.
Yafa means pretty, beautiful.
Yeah.
Just like Linda in Spanish.
Okay.
Idea. We have 3 kids. Our oldest, Jonathan, lives in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
He's married, also has 2 children. Our daughter, Ayelet, lives down in Los Angeles. She's married. She has 2 children we're blessed with. And our youngest, Ben, actually left last week for Israel.
Okay.
So he graduated from Sonoma Valley High School, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And now he graduated in 2017. And he's been working and going to school, and now he's back in Israel. So kind of like a little bit of an empty nest period.
Okay.
Yes. But
Are you going to need a support group after this?
Actually, we're pretty good at connecting to our theme here. We love having people over. So, hospitality.
Right.
Having friends from out of town spend the night and all that. That's kind of a big part of our togetherness.
So I know in our tradition that this is a fairly famous passage. And in our conversations earlier, you said this is not usually a passage that gets a lot of attention in your tradition. Is that true?
The chapter 19, I've never studied it without context from chapter 18.
Right. Without
a reference from chapter 15.
Okay.
When Sodom and Gomorrah is first mentioned, I think 15 or 13. Where actually there's the narrator of the story says, before God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So there's already that foreshadowing that we get way before.
Well, we're going to let you tell as much of that story as you want to today. But let's open up with a word of prayer or a blessing. Would you do that?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. We have a traditional blessing that we say before the study of Torah or any kind of rabbinic text, Bible, Christian Bible, Jewish Bible. So I'll do it in Hebrew first.
Please.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we bless God for giving us. We bless God, ruler of the universe, sovereign over all, that has sanctified us and has guided or commanded us to busy ourselves with the study of Torah.
Awesome. I actually recognize the first part of that. Baruch atah. Yeah,
all of our blessings,
Eloheinu.
Whatever we bless, whether it's the apple we're eating or the candles we're lighting, we're actually blessing God, not the apple, not the candles. It's thank you, God, for giving us these candles. Thank you, God, for giving us this food.
All right. Well, how about if I read the text this morning, and then I'll turn it over to you, and you can just tell us the story.
I'll do the best I can.
I know you will. All right. So, again, as we mentioned, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 19 this morning, where we begin. The 2 angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting at the gateway of the city. And when he saw them, he got up to meet them, and he bowed down with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then you can go on your way early in the morning." "No," they answered, "we'll spend the night in the square." But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him, and he entered into his house. And he prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Matzah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. And they called out to Lot, "Where are the men who came with you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them." And Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him. And he said, "No, my friends, do not do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters here who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you want with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." "Get out of the way," they replied. "This fellow has come here as a foreigner, and now they want to play the judge? We're going to treat you worse than we treated them." And they kept putting pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and they pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so that they could not find the door. And the 2 men said to Lot, "Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else who in the city who belongs to you? Because if you do, get them out of here, because we're going to destroy this place. For the outcry to the Lord against these people is so great that they have sent us to destroy it." This is the word of the Lord to you. Thanks be to God. All right. Well, Steve, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us what this story is about.
Okay, so good. So chapter 19, which you just, beginning of chapter 19, which you just read, in Jewish text study, we have to put it parallel to chapter 18.
Of course.
It's what seemingly is the classic model of hospitality, right? Abraham is sitting at his tent. Sarah is there mulling about, and the 3 men appear. And so we have Abraham kind of running to them and saying, "Come, rest, wash your feet, I'll feed you," and well, just the way, the mannerism and the behavior of Abraham and Sarah. Sarah, do this and you make that. The boy servant.
Yeah, what starts out as a customary offer of hospitality turns into this lavish feast.
Yeah, so we have a Hebrew, regarding our values in Judaism. One of the highest values is achnasat orchim, the way that we invite our guests in. Mm-hmm. In fact, we have commentary that says drop everything in order to bring the guest into the home and welcome them, make them feel welcomed, even if you're in the midst of prayer, even if you're having a moment with meditation with God. Mm-hmm. Put that down, because you've got people out here that need your hospitality. So now we jump to the story of Lot. And in Judaism, well, let me speak for myself.
Please,
right? Yeah. I see Lot as even more so than Abraham. Not Abraham's a great host and Lot not so much. I see Lot as arguably even being a greater host. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Abraham, and this is a good takeaway for us also as readers of the Bible. We have 2 situations. Two basic situations when we have people over. Either there's peace in the home, no drama, everything's good, peace in the neighborhood, everything is good, and we see someone, and I'm getting along with my wife, we have plenty of food, life is good, hey, come be with us, right? Everyone's cheerful. I have what to give them, plenty of bounty, right? I'm not under any pressure, no stress, and they have a great stay, right? But can we do that? Can we still bring someone into our house? Can we still be hospitable without even showing any sign that we actually are under stress? But we're not going to let you know about that, because that wouldn't be good hosts. So we have an extreme case. After seeing Abraham and the way that he received, Abraham and Sarah, the way that they received, we have to actually look careful at the conditions. It's easy. Lot, not so easy. He chooses to be at the gate of the town Now, let's just look at the conditions of what's going on in Sodom and Gomorrah right now. A lot of corruption, right? Evil. They've lost their way. They've lost their gratitude. Forgiveness probably doesn't exist in their daily operations. Lawlessness. So Lot is probably putting his life at risk by being out at this gate. Should someone come, a stranger, Lot knows what's going to happen to them.
Right.
So at a risk of his own life, right? Because we can only assume that if there's lawlessness in Sodom and Gomorrah, treating the stranger kindly is probably not among their priorities. On the contrary. So Lot is putting his life and I would say maybe the safety and security of his own at risk here. And when he does see the strangers, he encourages them, go to my house, right? But he doesn't say go through the town. He says suru, the Hebrew, go around,
Okay.
right? Get to my house. So he is still trying to be protective of his family. Maybe they can get there without being noticed, but he's not going to turn them away. Even when they said, it's okay, we'll go into the center of town, Lot could have said, hey, you know what? I invited you. You turned me down. Be on your way. Right?
Okay.
He didn't do that. He said, no, I insist. And when they came into Lot's house, he made them what we call the quick meal.
Right.
Right? Matzah. And did the hospitable thing. You know, when you stay the night, when you get up in the morning, we'll wash your feet and get you on your way. By the way, I noticed in your English translation it was wash your feet and stay the night, but in the Hebrew it's stay the night and then wash your feet.
Okay.
One might think, well, what's the difference? Well, there's a difference. I'm not sure if we have time to talk about that right now.
Okay.
So then what happens, right? We talked about, you and I, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about mob mentality.
Right.
And how absolutely brave, incredibly courageous someone must be to put themselves in front of mob mentality. And that's what happened. That's what happens. They come over to Lot's house. And by the way, this is the first time, I'm going to cut for a second, because in chapter 18, not only do we learn of the hospitality of Abraham and Sarah, but when God informs Abraham, I'm going to destroy the city, right? Just for you to know. Abraham has this, well, how can you destroy the innocent among the guilty?
Right.
Right? And so we also learn from that chapter 18 the story of compassion and justice, right? And maybe it was a test for Abraham. Right? Will you, not similar to Noah, when Noah was told, I'm going to destroy the earth, Noah just, okay, right? Not so with Abraham. And he said, but what if I can find 50? And God said, if you can find 50, I won't destroy. I'm sure you told this last week.
I did. I kind of used it as an example of intercession, in essence.
Yeah. So that's a great story of intercession, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then, of course, we enjoy if I can find 50, we're fantastic. I tell you what, but what if I can only, right? All the way down to 10.
All the way down to 10.
And God says, go ahead. If you can find 10, we won't destroy. And that's where that episode ends, right? We don't actually know what's happening. Suddenly, we have the visitors coming into Sodom and Lot inviting them into the house. So we're kind of left hanging with, well, whatever happened with Abraham finding 10? But when it says in one of the verses that you just read, all of the men, all of the people came to the house of Lot, then we understand, so they didn't find 10.
No.
But that's the first time that we get any indication of how that story ends.
Right.
So not only has Lot, at the risk of his own life, maybe, invited the guests over to his house, and now they're banging at the door, saying incredibly scary things.
Right.
And what does Lot do? He steps outside.
Yeah.
Who does that? That's pretty courageous.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of host you want.
Mm-hmm.
right? If people are coming and banging at the door and saying, hey, bring Scott out here. You want a host who's going to go, not just yell from the inside, go away. He goes outside.
Well, that's what I have my wife for.
Okay. Or the barking dog.
Or the barking dog,
That's
right.
So, when we read that, that's a wow moment. That's a wow moment. Abraham, everything was peaceful and serene out there in the desert. There was no enemies. There was no drama. With Lot, he has to endure this very stressful situation.
Yeah, these men came to dehumanize, to
Exactly. And so again, even at a deeper risk of his own life, now that he knows their intentions, he steps outside
right.
and puts his back up against the door and say, please reconsider. Right. Now, of course, he says this, what I call the ultimate bluff.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes we say things just to calm people down. I think I once gave you the example of a kidnapper who wants the $50,000 or I'm going to kill them. They have no intention of killing the person. They're not a killer, right? But it's just a ploy to get what they want.
I used the example of casting shade on them in order to expose their unrighteous.
Good. Yes, I have these two daughters.
Right.
Everything that we know about Lot, going all the way back to when Lot and Abraham were traveling together, and they were like-minded. They were. It wasn't a rift between Lot and Abraham. It was a rift between the herdsmen that ultimately caused them to say, "Listen, you go your way, and we'll go over here."
Right.
Lot and Abraham were like-minded. So if you do a character analysis of Lot, him throwing his daughters outside doesn't fit.
Right.
It doesn't fit. So I choose to believe that one as a bluff. It just doesn't mix with everything else that we know about Lot. So he meets the strangers before they have a chance to get into the city. At the risk of his own life, brings them to his house. When the mob comes knocking at the door, he himself steps out. And when the strangers realize, okay, we better help this guy out because now they're threatening him. Who are you? Right?
Right.
You knew yourself. So they quickly open the door, grab him, and pull him back in, and now they're all...
Yeah, they are not as meek or mild or, what's the word I'm looking for, as they would appear. They are not as...
Right. Yeah, exactly. So suddenly now they take action.
Right.
Right. And now they're saving Lot, seemingly. So now everybody's kind of holding the door. There's this big door they're pulling and they're holding, and we get this kind of a mysterious. They were blinded for. So maybe there's now a little bit of divineness that's helping out here.
Yeah.
Right. And we know how the rest. So nothing ultimately happens to the strangers. Nothing ultimately happens to Lot's. No one was accosted in the end. No one was the mob.
They make their escape.
They make their escape. Lot's daughters were fine. Nothing. He didn't throw them out. So none of this actually, no harm in the end. And that's all because of Lot's actions. He was the one that found them at the gate before they had a chance to get in, brought them to safety in his house, protected them, stepped outside. We don't know if Abraham would have done that.
Now, what about this idea that these angels have come because they have heard the cries, or the Lord has heard the cries of the people in Sodom and Gomorrah, that they're so great. What about the idea of judgment, God's judgment coming upon this town? Because not since chapters 5 or 6, before Lamech and man's inhumanity towards man, have we seen the apparent anger of God kindled to this degree.
Yeah. Well, in Genesis, early on in the creation story, we read of that we have been given a piece of God's image.
Yeah.
Right? And I think like any good parent might, that's not the way I taught you. That's not the way I brought you up.
Right.
And we can get furious as well, right? Depends on the parent. So, yeah, getting angry, we look at God's anger more as a sadness, more as a disappointment than wrath.
Okay.
The only really times it talks when it describes the wrath is when the nostrils flare. Right? There's this expression, nostrils flaring up. So, when we look at that as parents, at what point do we lose patience? At what point do we, I remember, borrowing my dad's car for the first time, and hey, if you don't treat it carefully, I won't finish the sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. But of course I treated it carefully. So when God says to the Israelites, make sure you treat the strangers for you yourself, he goes, I think, the Israelites were, of course,
right.
We were strangers, we know that.
Right.
Don't get angry. We're good.
So it's more of a just response and a compassionate response to the unrighteousness that's exhibited by this town, would you say?
Well, certainly a just response once we found out that we're not sweeping away the innocent with the good.
Right.
Because that was Abraham's job.
Yeah.
There were no good left. Right. So it makes us feel better to read this story that only evil people were swept away and judged. Right. And at the same time, I think we all, right, whoever the readers are, we all want to say, what's my takeaway?
I was just going to say, what should we take away from it?
We look at Abraham and Sarah and their hospitality. We look at Lot and his hospitality. First question I asked myself was, would I have the courage to do what he did? Right? Step one, would I be out at the city gates, at the risk of my family, to be out there just in case strangers show up? Would I go outside and face a mob, right? Mob mentality. And what kind of a host can I be when my life is under duress and stress and things are not ideal, like out there in the desert with Abraham and Sarah,
mm-hmm.
right? And how do I treat people when it looks as if most of them are, let's say evil. I'm going to say lost their way, have let their divine image get murky.
And that's a really great question, because we live amongst a world of people who we should have no expectations of the same values as we have.
Yes. I mean, we want to say, but there's universal values of compassion. No, there's not. It's not really universal. We might, Western civilization, maybe a little bit. But, we Jews, when we study this, listen, we're still shaking off a couple thousand years of persecution and suffering. Right? And most of the time at the hands of Christians. Christian church, the Catholic Church, all the way up to the Holocaust.
Right.
99% of the Nazis identified as Catholics. How does that work? How do you fix your head around, how could you possibly be a Christian or a Catholic and engage in
that kind of
Sodom
behavior.
and Gomorrah like action?
Right.
Right. So it's not, it's a great story. It's a great narrative. We try not to get too wrapped up in who wrote the Bible, who wrote Genesis, who wrote this story, right? But again, our takeaway is, any takeaway that we do, we want to say, how can I improve my life? How can I be a better person? How can I raise the bar a little bit higher of being the best I can be? How can I demand more from myself? Right?
And how can I be a better representative of this God that we serve?
Better representative of this God we serve, well put, and polishing our divine image and being ready to listen to God, even if sometimes that means putting our safety and well-being at risk, or God forbid, safety and well-being of our family, that's even harder.
Right.
Most would not do that. I don't think, depending on the situation, I'd have to give that heavy consideration as well.
Right.
But all of these are opportunities to walk closer with God. All of these are opportunities to walk humbly. I think what is Micah?
Yeah.
You know this better.
Right. But to do justly and to let mercy and to walk humbly.
That's right. So both of these stories, 19 can't be told without 18 because we need to see the balance of the two. They're like bookshelves. I was telling my wife Yafa this morning, I said it's like talking about Ginger Rogers without talking about Fred Astaire. They go together.
Well, and just so our viewers know, last week I did teach specifically on chapter 18, and this week I also taught on 19, and you really do need to put those two stories together. But it's also in addition to having my friend Steve here to share his experience and his understanding of this particular passage in Scripture as well. Do you have some final words for us?
Well, just that they're both great stories of hospitality, one under peaceful conditions, one under duress, and what would we do? What's our takeaway?
All right. You want to close us with a blessing? Or?
I'd love to.
Okay.
How about the priestly blessing?
That'd be great.
The blessing that Aaron the high priest gave the Israelites when they came out of Egypt. God bless your community. May God bless you and your community. May God's countenance, God's presence shine very warmly upon you and your community. May God always, when you call, come to you and grant you peace.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you'll be able to stay with us and enjoy our potluck after the service. Thank you all for being with us too. May the God of hope fill you with your hearts with joy and peace and contentment. God bless you. Go in peace.